IAMA, paperless voting machines are just waiting to be hacked in 2020. We are a Politico cybersecurity reporter and a voting security expert. Ask us anything. Intelligence officials have repeatedly warned that Russian hackers will return to plague the 2020 presidential election, but the decentralized and underfunded U.S. election system has proven difficult to secure. While disinformation and breaches of political campaigns have deservedly received widespread attention, another important aspect is the security of voting machines themselves. Hundreds of counties still use paperless voting machines, which cybersecurity experts say are extremely dangerous because they offer no reliable way to audit their results. Experts have urged these jurisdictions to upgrade to paper-based systems, and lawmakers in Washington and many state capitals are considering requiring the use of paper. But in many states, the responsibility for replacing insecure machines rests with county election officials, most of whom have lots of competing responsibilities, little money, and even less cyber expertise. To understand how this voting machine upgrade process is playing out nationwide, Politico surveyed the roughly 600 jurisdictions, including state and county governments, that still use paperless machines, asking them whether they plan to upgrade and what steps they had taken. The findings are stark. More than 150 counties have already said that they plan to keep their existing paperless machines or buy new ones. For various reasons, from a lack of sufficient funding to a preference for a convenient experience, America's voting machines won't be completely secure anytime soon. Ask us anything. Proof. A bit more about us. Eric Geller is the Politico cybersecurity reporter behind this project. His beat includes cyber policymaking at the Office of Management and Budget and the National Security Council, American cyber diplomacy efforts at the State Department, cybercrime prosecutions at the Justice Department, and digital security research at the Commerce Department. He has also covered global malware outbreaks and states' efforts to secure their election systems. His first day at Politico was June 14, 2016, when news broke of a suspected Russian government hack of the Democratic National Committee. In the months that followed, Eric contributed to Politico's reporting on perhaps the most significant cybersecurity story in American history, a story that continues to evolve and resonate to this day. Before joining Politico, he covered technology policy, including the debate over the FCC's net neutrality rules and the passage of hotly contested bills like the USA Freedom Act and the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act. He covered the Obama administration's IT security policies in the wake of the Office of Personnel Management hack, the landmark 2015 U.S.-China agreement on commercial hacking, and the high-profile encryption battle between Apple and the FBI after the San Bernardino, Calif. terrorist attack. At the height of the controversy, he interviewed then FBI Director James Comey about his perspective on encryption. J. Alex Halderman is professor of computer science and engineering at the University of Michigan and director of Michigan's Center for Computer Security and Society. He has performed numerous security evaluations of real-world voting systems, both in the U.S. and around the world. He helped conduct California's top-to-bottom electronic voting systems review, the first comprehensive election cybersecurity analysis commissioned by a U.S. state. He led the first independent review of election technology in India, and he organized the first independent security audit of Estonia's national online voting system. In 2017, he testified to the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence regarding Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. elections. Professor Halderman regularly teaches computer security at the graduate and undergraduate levels. He is the creator of Security Digital Democracy, a massive, open, online course that explores the security risks, and future potential, of electronic voting and Internet voting technologies. Update. Thanks for all the questions, everyone. We're signing off for now, but we'll check back throughout the day to answer some more, so keep them coming. We'll also recap some of the best Q&As from here in our cybersecurity newsletter tomorrow. Rackerman, what do you find are the most convincing arguments against Internet voting, for a non-technical audience? Politico, one of the things that experts tell me all the time is that we don't know how to do anything over the Internet with the level of security that we expect from our elections. Supporters of internet voting often point out that we trust the internet for other sensitive applications, like banking. But you can dispute a transaction and get your money back. There's really nothing happening online that's comparable to elections, in terms of the stakes. So the inherent vulnerabilities in the internet raise more serious questions for voting than for any other application. Eric Diarkolosisafrodes, what is the reason for the push for these machines when pen and paper seem so much more obviously secure and transparent? Is it just that tallying votes is faster? Or is there something I'm missing? Politico, it's important to note that there are two separate elements of voting where we can choose manual or electronic methods. The first is the voting machine. You can use your hands as that machine and mark a paper ballot by hand, or you can have an electronic device where you make your choices and it spits out a paper record, or only records your vote digitally, which is the big problem in many counties right now. The second is the tabulation machine. You can have poll workers manually counting votes based on the paper ballots, or you can have an optical scanner that digitally tallies votes based on those same ballots. Tallying votes isn't as much of an issue, because optical scanners are pretty fast, as managing the devices that are used to actually record the votes. And many election officials find it more of a hassle to manage stacks of paper ballots than a handful of electronic machines. Of course, electronic machines break down, so there are management problems there, too. Eric Break 0-1, what do you think about the Brazilian voting machines and what happened when the Superior Electoral Court of Brazil denied your participation on an election auditing process? Politico, Brazil's paperless electronic voting machines have major security problems. I haven't had an opportunity to examine them myself, but fortunately Professor Diego Arana, formerly of the University of Campinas, has. His research details many flaws, including ways that an attacker could potentially figure out how everyone voted. C. Alex Necrost, can you show me proof that the current way of voting is not hacked? Politico, no, that's part of the problem with relying on paperless technology. You can't audit it, so you can't prove that negative. This is not the same as saying that these machines have been hacked. But I can't prove that there was a problem is not the level of confidence you want in elections. Eric Necrost, can you show me proof that the current way of voting is not hacked? Politico, no, and that is the fundamental problem with our current election system, it's based on faith, rather than evidence. Our election system should be designed to produce evidence sufficient to convince a rational skeptic that the outcome is correct. One way to do that is to have transparent, observable processes, including statistically rigorous risk-limiting audits. Instead, all too often, voters simply have to take election officials' word that everything is fine. Most election officials are great people and diligent public servants, but it seems fundamentally wrong that voters should be forced to trust them. Alex DeRuber, what is the safest voting machine out there right now? Politico, from a security perspective, the safest technology right now is hand-marked paper ballots (HMPB), coupled with precinct count optical scanners (PCOS) and risk-limiting audits (RLAs). In this kind of system, voters mark ballots manually and put them into a scanner right in the polling place. The scanner creates an electronic record of the marks, and the physical ballots are stored in a ballot box. This means there are redundant records, physical ballots and electronic records. Officials can use an RLA to efficiently check that both sets of records agree about the winner. Tampering with both kinds of records, in a way that agreed, would require both a high-tech attack and a large conspiracy of people on the ground changing the paper. Alex Operation Maple Syrup, what's the best way to overcome the hanging chad issue with paper ballots that we saw during the presidential election in 2000? Politico, manufacturers of paper ballots have significantly improved the design of these ballots since 2000. No voting method is perfect, but research from 2012 suggests that the error rate is between 1% and 2%. The vast majority of the voting problems I heard about on Election Day 2018 related to electronic voting machines, rather than paper ballots or their scanners. We've come a long way since 2000. Eric. Dreadnought 7410, are you saying that foreign government agencies can and have tampered with actual voting machines and alter votes? From what I've read from the Mueller report was that most efforts were focused on online social media, not actual government infrastructure. If a voting district has been tampered with, what are the steps for a backup with paper ballots, and what's the likelihood of people changing their votes, becoming uninterested in redoing the process? What is the power of blockchain in voting, and can it be effective? I only recall one presidential candidate, Andrew Yang, weighing pros and cons of it, but I am largely unfamiliar with this method. Politico, this is no evidence that foreign governments have tampered with voting machines to alter votes. The problem is, there's a real threat that such an attack could happen in the future. Across much of the U.S., we vote on computer voting machines that have known vulnerabilities. And even in states that have a paper trail that can't be changed in a cyberattack, the paper usually isn't checked unless there's a recount. Take a look at this federal court ruling about Georgia's voting system, released just this morning. It shows in detail just how open to attack some of the electronic voting systems used today are. Opening square bracket, closing square bracket, opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis. Alex. Peavsey, India uses EVMs that haven't had any problems. They aren't connected to any systems whatsoever, so can't be hacked unless you hit each individual machine. Why can't the US? Politico, it's true that India has the largest deployment of electronic voting machines in the world, based on a homegrown machine that is dramatically simpler than the touchscreen computers common in the US, but they still have lots of problems. I worked with researchers in India several years ago to do a detailed security analysis of the Indian machines. You can read our research paper and see a video of our findings here. With just a few minutes of physical access, an attacker can tamper with the machines to change the votes stored in them, or to make the machines count future elections dishonestly. We built low-cost hardware devices to carry out both attacks. As a result of our research, India has recently rolled out a voter verifiable paper audit trail (VVPAT), which could help detect such attackers. Unfortunately, I understand that there are some major unresolved problems with the implementation. First among them, the audits aren't risk-limiting, so in a close election, they might not be thorough enough to detect outcome-changing fraud. Alex. Citizen Millennial, if our local voting area has refused to get paper backups, what can we do to pressure them? Politico, point them to the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee's recommendations. https://www.intelligence.senate.gov/sites/default/files/document/report_volume1.pdf and GT. Given Russian interventions to undermine the credibility of the election process, states should take urgent steps to replace outdated and vulnerable voting systems. At a minimum, any machine purchased going forward should have a voter verifiable paper trail. Or the findings of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And GT, local, state, and federal elections should be conducted using human-readable paper ballots by the 2020 presidential election. Or if they really want to get down into the details, to my Coursera course, Securing Digital Democracy. Edit to add, groups like Verified Voting have great resources about election security that could be a big help for your local efforts. Alex. Laws 27. While I understand it can be hacked, is there any evidence that any of the previous machines used in previous elections, at any level, have been hacked? While Russia is often cited as wanting to mess with Western elections, is that any evidence out there of a credible threat, intent to commit wild-scale voter hacking at any election? Beyond the teenager in his parents' basement. And, kind regards, look forward to hearing from you. Politico, there is no evidence that a voting machine has been hacked while it was used in an election. And Russia has found it much easier to mess with our minds through disinformation campaigns than with our voting machines, so this is not likely to ever be their top attack vector. The concern we see about voting security is about closing as many gaps as possible. There are certainly other gaps that are more likely to be exploited. But maintaining confidence is an important part of conducting elections, and people lose confidence when they know that they're voting on machines with vulnerabilities. Eric Skittles, hi Alex, I work on election security in my state, assessing different county setups. Every county votes on paper, but you showed me last year that even the tabulators are susceptible. I was lucky enough to be in the audience during your talk at DEF CON. ES&S seems to have at least a decent system in place for delivering and handling election definition USB sticks. What's the real risk of tabulators being hacked? Is there an easy way to check what vulnerabilities exist by firmware version? Do you have any recommendations on securing paper ballot states? Politico, thanks. Yes, even tabulators, optical scanners, are susceptible to hacking, because under the hood, they're pretty powerful computers, with complex, reprogrammable software and sometimes even wireless internet access for transmitting results on election night. In past studies, we've found that election definition files, which officials copy to ever machines before the election to program in the ballot design and the counting rules, etc., can carry malware or exploit things like buffer overflows to infect the machines. ES&S is a good illustration of the risk. They create the ballot programming for 2,000 jurisdictions across 34 states from their corporate headquarters, which is a much more centralized point of attack that most people are aware exists. One important defense is to make sure you have the latest firmware. But voting machine firmware tends to be years out of date, because there's a lengthy certification process. For instance, the latest certified ES&S software still relies on Windows 7, which will soon be unsupported by Microsoft. Incredibly, most states do not even require that jurisdictions use the newest available firmware. For example, Georgia currently uses paperless DRES across the state with firmware that hasn't been updated since 2005. The strongest and most important defense is to rigorously audit the paper trail, through manual risk-limiting audits. Even if the machines are somehow hacked, such audits ensure that there's only a small statistical chance that any outcome-altering fraud will go undetected. That creates a powerful deterrent, and if an attack happens anyway, you can correct it by recounting the paper. Alex Marsolds, why bother with voting machines at all? There is no way to verify the integrity of the electronic count, neither for an individual voter nor at the national level. Hence, you'll need a manual count to be able to trust the result, which reduces the machine to an incredibly expensive pen. Politico, even after hacking many different voting machines myself, I don't agree that we should get rid of computer counting technology completely. There is a long, rich history of fraud in paper voting. See _fraud #tampering with _electronic _voting machines that we'd be foolish to ignore. We can do a lot better by using computer systems that are software independent. That means that any error or hack affecting the outcome can be detected. One way to do this is to use paper ballots with optical scanners and manual risk-limiting audits, so you get two independent records of every vote that would need to be separately hacked to change the results without detection. That's way stronger than either hand-counted voting or unaudited computer voting alone. Alex Damspot, why can't voting machines give you a receipt of your votes? If each receipt had a unique code, you could go to a website later and see whether your vote was counted. Maybe even see all the votes cast, anonymously of course. If your votes don't show up, you would have a reasonable right to complain. As it is, the whole thing is a black box where no one has any idea of what happens after you leave the machine. Politico, there's an active research area about this, called End-to-End Verifiable Voting System. _auditable _voting _systems. The challenge is, can we make a kind of cryptographic receipt that proves to you, the voter, that your vote has been correctly included in the count, but that doesn't let you prove to anyone else how you voted? Because if you could use the receipt to sell your vote, or you could be coerced into voting a certain way. Hopefully someday soon we'll have paper-based voting systems that also gives you this kind of proof. Alex N. David. Technically inclined people were warning about this way back in the early 2000s. Do you have any insight on why those warnings went unheeded for so long and people are just now starting to catch on to these problems? Politico. For virtually any big but hard to visualize problem, it often takes a galvanizing event to grab people's attention. That's what Russia's 2016 interference did. It brought these issues from academic conferences to cable news. Even though there were no confirmed cases of hacked voting machines, the issue of voting machine security became, reasonably, wrapped up in broader discussions about ways to improve the system. Eric